All right. Well, I think that we will go ahead and begin. So welcome to session number 9 of the 20th Annual Northwest Interlibrary Loan and Resource Sharing Conference. Number 9. Today's date is Friday, September 3rd, 2021. This session is titled DEI, ILL, and a Call to Action, and will be presented by 3 librarians from the University of Missouri in Kansas City. They are Jen Salvo, Head of Resource Sharing, Robin Sommer, Senior Library Information Specialist, and Gail Williams, who is also a Senior Library Information Specialist. My name is Karl G. Siewert. My pronouns are they, them, and their, and I'm the convener for this session. This session is being recorded with permission from the presenters. They retain the copyright to the information they are presenting and may request its removal from public viewing in the future by written request to the NWILL committee chairperson. However, at this time, it is planned that recordings will be available once captions have been added. Attendees will be notified when recordings are available. To turn live captioning on, click the CC link at the bottom of the screen and select Show Subtitle. If you have a question during the session, please use the Q&A function in Zoom, and I will pose those to the presenter at the end of the presentation. The door prize keyword will be revealed between the presentation and the Q&A. Please see the door prize link in the Event Mobi menu. When the Zoom webinar ends, please complete the post-session survey in Event Mobi located at the bottom of the session page. And on that note, I will turn our session over to our presenters.
All right. Thank you, Karl. So thank you all for attending our session today. And thank you, Karl, for already introducing us so we can take care of this slide. I'm Jen, and then we have...
I'm Robin.
And I am Gail. And so first thing I would like to share with you our land acknowledgement. And actually, we can have you read this on your own after the presentation, but our point in sharing this is just as a reminder for us that we all live on stolen land and that we are responsible for its well-being. Next slide, please. So this presentation is divided into 3 parts. In the first part, I will share with you the catalyst for the work that we're now doing. Robin will then speak specifically about the ILL department, and Jen will close out with collaborations that we're doing with other departments within the libraries and with other libraries. Before I begin though, there are a couple of key acknowledgements that need to be made. First of all, white supremacy is the status quo. It's not just a bunch of white men running around in hooded gowns waving the Confederate flag. White supremacy is also centering whiteness as the standard when policies are created and upheld, or when hiring decisions are made and so forth. And secondly, neutrality is not a myth. Libraries and archives are not neutral. You can read more on both of these topics with links that we provided in our list of references. So now we come to the call. And so the murder of Trayvon Martin in 2012 was the beginning of the hashtag era. There was a list of hashtags that grew over the previous decade to the point where the names kind of started to blur together and were just as quickly forgotten as they showed up on the list. So things changed on May 25th, 2020, when George Floyd's name became a hashtag. This was different because his murder was caught live on camera in real time. And you could see his facial expressions as he was dying, and also the expression of the officer that was killing him. And something like this had not been seen before, at least not by mainstream America. And so, of course, this sparked outrage across the country and around the world. Social media blew up. There were new book clubs that were born. Public and private organizations made anti-racist statements. And even here in Kansas City, where we're best known for our barbecue and our professional football team, we flexed a little bit of social justice muscle. There were nightly protests, marches, and arrests and instances of police brutality. as there were across the rest of the country. And so this activism spread onto the UMKC campus and to the university libraries. Here on the screen is a timeline of key events that occurred last summer, and I will share the highlights of these actions. So the major catalyst for all of this was the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee. We did change the name of the committee in December 2020 to the Equity Committee, but for the remainder of this presentation, I will refer to it as DEI because that's the name of the committee when these actions were taken. So this slide does contain a brief history of the committee, as well as our charge and the goals of the committee that I again urge you to read on your own time. So the first thing that happened was on June the 2nd, the DEI committee sent out an email to all university library employees. And these shown here are the main points from this email. But they can best be summarized as asking our white colleagues to examine other points of view by reading and listening to their BIPOC colleagues. And then on July the 1st, there was a mandatory anti-racist breakout discussion required for all libraries employees. It was created and facilitated by the DEI co-chairs, and we caucused by race. There were 2 Black groups of faculty and staff, 1 non-Black POC group, and then the whites were divided by department into groups of 4 to 6 people. The white and non-Black POC groups were given 3 questions. How have you educated yourself on structural racism and anti-Blackness in institutions? What ways have you participated in perpetuating this system? And what concrete actions can we take that will shift our culture to creating and sustaining an anti-racist environment? In the 2 Black groups, we were free to discuss the questions if we wanted, or our personal experiences, or our expectations of what we thought would result from the discussion. And we could also leave at any point, especially towards the end with the open sharing session. So shortly after the discussion, the co-chairs, they sent out a Qualtrics survey, and the results were overwhelmingly positive. There was 1 negative result saying that basically it was a waste of time. But other than that, I feel like the discussion was important because it got buy-in from our mostly white staff. This was a key way in which they became aware of the necessity of actions that would take place later on. So the next action item was on August the 25th. The BIPOC workers of the library released an 11-point statement, and I will highlight key points from that on the next 3 slides. So in regards to changing the name of the Miller-Nichols Library, the Miller-Nichols family, they are by far the library's largest donor. And Miller-Nichols is the son of J.C. Nichols, a renowned real estate developer who implemented practices such as redlining and blockbusting. These practices led to the historic segregation of Greater Kansas City, the effects of which are still seen today. So the fountain in this photo was named after J.C. And during the summer of 2020, with everything else going on, there was a community outcry that led to his name being removed from this fountain, as well as the street that ran alongside the fountain. And meanwhile, on the UMKC campus, the African American Student Union had its own list of demands. And one of those demands was to take the name of the son of a segregationist off of the library. And so basically the BIPOC statement, this point on the statement was made in support of TASU. Next slide. And another key point for us was to retain the diversity liaison role. In January of 2020, our organizational coordinator retired, and she was also the library's diversity liaison. And the coordinator position was not replaced. But over the next few months, the director of DEI position was created and an appointment was made in the summer of 2020. And so these final 4 points, they're all related to tangible ways of making the libraries a more equitable place to work. Major steps have been taken, such as equity raises towards a living wage, the way job interviews are conducted, and the pursuit of changes in how staff receive promotions and are classified. There's still a great deal of work to do, but progress is definitely being made. And so these are some other actions that took place during the summer 2020 and beyond. The DEI committee over last summer, they launched a worker relief fund in response to COVID-19. And then the University of Missouri Division of Diversity and Inclusion, they had regular Zoom check-ins with Black staff across both the main campus and the Hospital Hill campus. And they also hosted webinars for anyone to view. The We Here group is, well, it started out as a BIPOC only Facebook group of librarians, library workers, and students. And there we can network and receive job announcements, and it's a safe place to vent. It has since grown into a web space that offers professional development opportunities and community support for BIPOC in the community. And there is a UMKC affiliate. Normally we meet once a month, but during this time we met nearly weekly. And finally, the university administration, they developed an equity action plan, which was a direct response to the BIPOC worker statement. This was posted in January of 2021. And one of the key responses to that was requiring each department to develop its own anti-racist action plan. And so I'm going to turn it over to Robin now, who will discuss the ILL department's plan.
Thanks, Gail. So yeah, I'm going to be telling you about how we as a department responded to the BIPOC Workers Seek Equity document, and then what we're continuing to work on now. So our department, we had 2 very long and at times uncomfortable conversations about the document. Both of these conversations lasted around 3 hours, and we're a fairly small department of only 4 people. So these were draining for all of us, but these 2 discussions, we found ourselves continually coming back to the question of how do we make these recommendations from our friends and colleagues a reality. So as recommended in the document, we began by creating our department anti-racist action plan. So for this plan, we borrowed templates already in existence from College of Holy Cross and the University of Rochester, and then we created our own from those. So using those templates, these were the goals and actions that we identified as the things that we could work on that address the recommendations from the equity document. On the left, you can see the goals we outlined, and then on the right, you can see the actions we took as steps to work toward them, which I'll give a brief summary of. So the document first prompted us to engage in resolving naming inconsistencies in our documentation web pages. We have multiple libraries on 2 different campuses. So we then umbrellaed our library names under university libraries. We also took a de-escalation training that our colleagues created, and flexible work arrangements have become the norm for our department and for many departments among the libraries. We also revised a couple workflows and policies in regards to how undergraduate and guest researcher requests were processed. Previously, we restricted undergrad requests for theses, dissertations, and other articles that would require direct purchase. This service we've always offered to graduates and faculty, but we wanted to remove any research barriers for our underclassmen. We also slightly changed how our guest researcher requests were routed. So our guest researchers are local businesses or individuals that pay us a fee in order to access our catalog and databases. And then we deliver their requests with a turnaround time of 24 hours. So previously, these requests would be categorized as rush and then processed accordingly. We now reroute these requests to a standard queue, basically removing that rush status. And that simple workflow movement hasn't had any impact on our turnaround time for those requests either. So we were also recently prompted to review and update our hiring documentation, not only because we recently had a new employee join our team, but also because the library and the university-wide efforts to remove any possible barriers or inequities during the hiring process. So during this process, we revised interview questions, job descriptions, job postings to be more inclusive. So these have all been actions we've taken in last year, and then now I'll tell you about projects that we're currently working on. In an effort to let our patrons know where we stand on these issues, we drafted anti-racism and anti-oppressive statements that we intend to include on ILL paperwork and web pages. Within these drafts, we asked our patrons to join us in anti-racist efforts by trying to avoid materials that might perpetuate harm to marginalized communities, and then asking them to think about incorporating anti-racist actions in their research, their work, their personal life. We posted these drafts internally and asked for feedback and discussion from our library colleagues. We had a lot of good discussion and feedback from colleagues all over the libraries. And the main concerns brought up boiled down to patrons maybe feeling scrutinized or judged for the materials that they were requesting. And that also the burden of possible unfavorable patron reactions would fall almost entirely on our service desk staff. However, with these concerns in mind, most of our colleagues were and are supportive of the statements and the need for them. So this is still a work in progress. These statements are still being drafted while we consider ideas and concerns from our colleagues. And then another project that we are currently working on has been to exempt historically Black colleges and universities and tribal colleges and universities from ILL charges as a way of minimizing barriers and privilege in our work. Our general policy is to charge for ILL services, except for when we are part of a larger reciprocal group, because our financial situation is such that we still do need to charge sometimes. And while we recognize the ILL fees are a barrier for many institutions, we shouldn't ignore, but they can be a more significant barrier for institutions with larger populations of historically marginalized students. So in the course of our anti-racist work, we took a look at this policy through a more inclusive and anti-oppressive lens. We took a look at our ILL data and realized that HBCU and TCU libraries do not typically borrow from us, but we have sometimes borrowed from them. So we used the data available on the National Center for Education Statistics website and created our own spreadsheet of various institutions listed there, and have now begun creating subgroups through ILLIAD. So in the near future, we plan to include Hispanic serving colleges and universities in this exempt group. And then this will be a project that we continue to explore and update in the future. So that's what we've been working on, and I'll hand it over to Jen to talk about how we're moving forward.
Okay, so I'm the one who's really bad at driving the slides, so I'm going to try and be better about that. So I'll be here to talk about some ways that we're going to continue doing our work. So one of the ways that we'll continue is to uphold our commitments to equity in our personal lives and in our individual professional development, as well as our collective work. So it is part of our library wide charge to everybody as individuals to engage in this work on an ongoing manner. And we, every person is accountable for doing that. Another way that we can continue to play a leading role, we've already started this work, but we've used this as a way to collaborate with other departments and to help with the university-wide efforts that are in the Equity Action Plan. So we're continuing to do things like mentor other departments in developing their anti-racist action plans. We've developed some templates. We have talked openly about our approaches, and we've insisted on action all the way up the library chain, trying to keep it on the radar of library administration. We also serve on, ILL staff members serve on various committees, and we can use those positions on committees to advocate for equity, even if the committees are not equity related. Equity is something that is universal and can be achieved through a variety of means, whether that's serving on a budget committee or a staff hiring and orientation committee. So we'll also work within ongoing and future library-wide efforts that are still in play. Well, there's a lot of that on the handout that we've provided in the event Moby space. So we're also this is one of our first efforts to try and reach out to other libraries to try and encourage other libraries to take similar action. So this is one way, doing this presentation is one way that we're reaching out to other libraries. We're also planning to integrate messaging through our regular ILL correspondence that we have with other libraries to try and pass further information out to other libraries that we do business with. One way that we can do that is to link out to our newly created University Libraries Equity Initiatives webpage, which is one of the links that we've provided on the handout. And we can also share out future ideas that we come up with organically. Cross-departmentally, we're looking for opportunities or to continue opportunities that have already begun. We have one collaboration that we started pre-COVID, but have, then COVID happened. But to collaborate with the Scholarly Communications Department in developing some open access information that can be disseminated through ILL correspondence with our patrons. So for example, when we supply an article that we found through open access, we can link to more information about what open access is. It can also be used by our Scholarly Communications Department to promote open access as a means of publishing among the faculty as an education and awareness tool. We'd like to cultivate more awareness, access, acceptance of open access resources and publishing on our campus. Two specific ways that we are still going to continue to work on is one is with collections advocacy. So after we establish a working relationship with those in the University of Missouri system who negotiate electronic resources vendor contracts, we started to plant the idea of developing a standards-driven licensing agreement. You'll see the note here, but Scarlett Galvin, who is a collection strategist librarian at Grand Valley State University, is really the primary person who's putting this information out there in a really well-developed visual way. And it basically just means that if your library holds certain values, your contracts that you sign with vendors should reflect those values. And if they don't reflect those values, it's time to look at why you're signing that contract or what is the contents of that contract. So advocating for those terms in terms of if let's walk the walk. So another way of advocating for better equity and access is through better terms for resource sharing. So making sure that those contracts that we have with electronic resource licensing are technology neutral. They don't require adherence to CON2. They allow for more flexible peer-to-peer sharing among individual patrons. And they allow for international ILL They're transparent in their pricing, and they don't require non-disclosure agreements. So those are things that we can do to try and make sure that we are working on those values in our licensing agreements. So we're here to issue a call to action for the resource sharing community, and we hope that you can join us in taking concrete and meaningful action. These are some ways that you can take those actions. One way is to just look at your policies. Policies can be changed, but sometimes they inadvertently uphold the status quo. So a lot of this shows itself in the fear that someone may abuse the system if we change the policy. So think about what are you fearing if you extend privileges to a certain group, for example. So as Robin mentioned, we changed some of our policies that gave equitable access to some resources that we have to pay for. We gave that access to undergrads, and it had virtually no different, it didn't impact our budget in a negative way. It didn't impact our request volume in a negative way. And we did a soft launch, so we didn't, advertise it, but what it meant is that those few undergraduates who do need to use that service were able to use it. And there was no barrier to access for that. So consider how you can make your policies more equitable. If you privilege faculty over students, if you privilege graduate students over undergraduates, librarians over staff, full-time staff over part-time staff, think about ways that you can make your policies more equitable in your library and your department. So another thing is to not get stuck in learning mode. So you can practice, you can learn, and you can practice by doing. So considering how you can take actions at the same time that you are learning. Don't wait for someone to tell you to act. Don't wait for permission, and don't wait for someone else to start acting first. Sometimes you can create more momentum by starting to perform actions yourself. And the chances are that you have more agency than you think. So while you might not be able to make wide sweeping changes to policies, you can make smaller changes to policies. You can see how they work. You can show that they are, allaying some fears that others might have about change, and then you can continue to build momentum. You can start small and do what's in your power, and then talk about it. That's the big thing that's helped our library move forward, is that when we openly talk about what we're doing and how we're approaching it, and we involve others in our thinking and in our decision making, then we're starting to get others interested in what we're doing, and they're thinking about what they can do in their own areas. Thinking outside your ILL box. So resource sharing connects with all these other different library services, or circulation, cataloging, wherever we are, and using that as an opportunity to build collaboration can get more buy-in for your ideas. So one thing you can do is to compare your libraries and your department's demographics to the rest of your community. Do you reflect the population that you serve? Do you reflect the population of your surrounding area? Have you considered barriers in your current recruitment and hiring process? So one practice that UMKC is starting to implement university-wide, and that the university libraries have already done in several job searches, is to distribute interview questions in advance to candidates. This allows the candidate to be more prepared and is a better reflection of how they would prepare in a workplace setting. So we've received lots of positive feedback from candidates. We've had more productive interview time with our candidates as a result of this practice. So if you see that there are things that need to be changed in some of your policies as reflected by your demographics, what you find, then advocating for those would be a way to take action. If you haven't already had opportunities to engage in open, honest discussion, then you can start them. So Starting open and honest discussion with your departments, your libraries, or your professional communities. Having a common read is a great place to start. On a previous slide that Gail showed you, we did a common read within the library. We all read Ibram X. Kendi's How to Be an Anti-Racist, and we had a colleague who led a book discussion among the entire library staff. So that was a way for us to engage in those issues through this common read. But you don't have to read an entire book. You can read shorter things like articles, and you can do them with smaller groups of people, not the entire library if that's not something that you're arranging. There's a great list that's put out there by Karl Strand. She's a librarian with the University of Wisconsin system, and it's called Disrupting Whiteness in Libraries and Librarianship, a reading list. And we've included this link in our handout so you can find it. This is a great place to start to look for articles that are specific to library and information sciences. And so we have a project for you. We would like to challenge everybody to develop a department anti-racist action plan. Whether you're a department of 1 or a department of 3 or a department of 4 or a department of 20, you can start an anti-racist action plan, and we've provided a template for you in our handout. This template, like Robin mentioned, is kind of an amalgamation of 2 other templates that we borrowed from 2 other universities. And you can see the template, but you can also start looking for your own. Another thing that we challenge you to do is to rethink your policies. Talking to your library leadership is a great place to start, but you can also rethink your own department policies as well and present those. The big thing is to ensure that your policies are reflecting your institution's values. So if your institution says it values equity, then your policies should be equitable. You can scale the policy changes and increment them. So make them incremental, go little steps at a time in your implementation of them. You can trial things for a little while and see what the effect is, but the ultimate goal is to strive for equity, to make those policies more equitable. So we're asking you, will you join us? And we'd love if you could drop us a line if you'd like to. There are many other things that we hope to be able to implement, but we also really love to hear everybody else's ideas as well. So our department email address is here. The slides are distributed on the event Mobi page, and they include our references as well. So you'll be able to find those later as well. So we wanted to thank you for attending our presentation, and we hope that you will take action and move the resource sharing community toward a more anti-racist and equitable future. So thank you. And do you have questions?
So there are quite a few questions. Before I jump into that, though, if you could stop sharing, I would like to share the slide for the what's the word I want? I have too many things going on. That's my problem. So I'm going to share the slide in just a moment. Before I do that, let me start by reading one of the questions in the Q&A. So as a librarian, we are not to let our personal beliefs get in the way with our job, according to the ALA Code of Ethics. Do you feel these changes might affect or be affected by personal beliefs?
As Gail explained, it is a mission of our university, and it is a mission of our library. So because it is embedded in those 2 mission statements, it's not necessarily a personal choice. We are following directives from our administration.
Okay. All right, so I found my slide, so let me bring that up for you. So this park has been an active volcano for almost 700,000 years. I'm sorry, that is session 12. I'm giving you a preview. My fault. There we go. So for session 9, this Oklahoma park has outdoor sports courts and an adventure playground. It is Gathering Place of Tulsa, which is right around the corner from where I live. So that's the one. The name of the park is just Gathering Place. So that's what you'll put in for the door prize. And I will leave that up while I read another question. So this question, when you talk about standards-driven licensing, can you give examples of some kinds of standards you might push for or demand, or objectionable clauses you've had to push back on?
So we are just now starting this work on standards-driven licensing agreements. Largely what we're looking at is what Scarlett Galvin has put out there. If you go to in our reference list, we have a link to a page, her blog, where she talks about this, but she did just give an ARL, I believe, or ARCL session, and it's on YouTube as well. I can try and find it real quick, but it does a really good job of explaining what are some things that you might advocate for in a standards-driven licensing agreement. She's really the best one to speak about that.
Okay. So there was a question in the chat earlier. Let me take a look for that. Have you reached out to OCLC to create an HBCU/TC group so other libraries can join a free group similar to Elvis? If not, have you shared the list of institutions with others who would like to join you?
We have not reached out to OCLC because we are not part of any HBCU or TCU institution. So it wouldn't be our place to reach out and ask them to create a group for institutions that we don't belong to. And we have not shared our list. We took the lists that are available on the national database, and we just did a search to find the OCLC symbols for each one. We found that many of those libraries did not have OCLC or did not have active OCLC symbols. So many of them do have OCLC symbols, but some of them are non-suppliers in OCLC. So in order to create, some sort of like understanding, so we use ILLiad. So in order for ILLiad to understand that we're not going to charge them, we entered their information into our ILLiad addresses directory anyway and set them as an exempt charge so that if we ever do receive a request from them, we could understand that we're not going to charge them. We do accept requests through a variety of means, not just through OCLC, or we also accept DocLine, we accept Rapid, and we also allow them to email, like just email us if they don't have any of those systems. They could even print out an ALA form and send us a letter by snail mail or fax or something like that. So we haven't distributed our lists or anything, but the information for which institutions belong to those groups is publicly available. It is a little bit of work to go through and do the OCLC symbols, and we might be able to do that in the future, but we wanted to reserve some time to reach out to these institutions first and let them know, because we actually just finished this project in ILLiad, getting all the information in there. So we would like to contact the institutions first and let them know before we distribute their OCLC symbols widely.
So Jenny from OCLC in the chat is saying we'd be happy to work to create profile groups representing HBCUs and tribal libraries. We can reach out to these groups to, sorry, scrolling fast, to make sure they are in favor of the idea. Then more institutions could use those profile groups and set up policies based on membership in them, like not charging them. Yeah, so, and another suggestion was to create a group of libraries So it would be the other side of it. Create a group of libraries that are willing to lend free to HBCUs and tribal libraries, so that those libraries could create, could request items from that list of libraries. And I'm seeing a lot of positive responses to that in the chat. So
I would just urge OCLC to reach out to representatives of those institutions before engaging in this work. This is something that we're doing kind of to skirt around our current free lending policy, because we typically only engage in free lending when we're part of a large group. So this was a way for us to embed some sort of equity policy into our existing policy. And we started with these groups just because they are well defined and they are available on a nationally published list. But that doesn't mean that those are the only institutions that we would ever include in this equity policy. So this is something that we look forward to growing in the future.
okay, so we still have a little bit more time. I want to get to a couple more questions. There was a follow-up from the person who asked the initial question about the code of ethics. They're clarifying that they wonder if the changes that you are affecting will affect the ways that other people, that your colleagues believe and change the way that they think.
I don't know, that's hard to say. I mean, does anyone else want to chime in on that? We don't really know what our other colleagues think. We just know that a lot of our colleagues are engaged in this work. We hope that they are reconsidering their own policies. We all have anti-racist action plans in every department, so we can see what changes other departments are making. In that survey following the breakout sessions that Gail mentioned, there was only one negative comment among the entire library staff. Most people felt like engaging in this work was positive and necessary. So it seems like everybody's kind of on board in the same way, which is, I mean, Kansas City is very purple, so politically, so the fact that we're mostly on board is a good sign.
Okay, I think we have time for just one last question. This is for Gail. When you initially came together in 2020, following the murders by police of so many people, how were committee members supported while disclosing high emotions?
Well, I have to say that we were very supportive. We did, have a few meetings and where we were able to say what was on our minds. I mean, while I'm sorry, I'm a little nervous.
Okay.
But we were able to say what was on our minds without fear of reprisal, because it wasn't just us. It was it was like most people, no matter what your race was, you were appalled by what had happened. And so I just feel like we had great support, especially because one of our associate deans is also a woman of color. And so she has a lot of sway with the university administration. And so she made sure that we had the space to speak by ourselves, as well as to put out the questions that we sent out in email, or to she backed us up on the statement, the BIPOC worker statement. So.
All right, well, we are out of time. This has been a great conversation, and I hope that it will continue. I do want to remind everyone to fill out the post-session survey that's at the bottom of the session page in EventMobi. I want to thank our panelists very much for this presentation. It was very exciting, and I'm looking forward to sharing the recording with coworkers. So thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.